What's up, everybody? Welcome back to your favorite New York Jets subscription podcast, Badlands. I'm your host, Joe Caporoso. A little midweek Wednesday AM coffee to wrap up the month of April. Probably the busiest month in Badlands history. So I just felt like an appropriate day to have a little AM coffee and reflect back and look ahead at what's on the way. I'm also going to use the majority of this podcast to talk about the initial reactions to the Jets draft class and also the reaction to the reaction and the feedback that often comes from not fully agreeing with every decision that your team makes draft weekend, which is not new, but I think is worth talking through in particular with this class and this regime. Before I get into everything, I think the month of April is the most podcasts we've ever done in a single month. And other life stuff was still going on for all of us. And at least for me personally, I don't get through doing all these podcasts without my boost from Magic Mind every single morning, which again, if you listen to this podcast, you know we've been fans for a long time. I find it very convenient to have a subscription set up and use the service that they have. It comes with free shipping, easy delivery. If for whatever reason you don't like it, it's a very easy cancellation process. Comes with 15 bottles or 30 bottle cases, up to you. For our listeners, you can get up to 48% off with my code JETS20. I'll also embed a link in the podcast episode here if you want to click through. I take it every single morning with my coffee. It does not replace coffee. Tastes good, and I just find that it helps from an energy and mental clarity perspective. And again, with the subscription element, it's just there all the time, and it just shows up consistently. And I've been taking it or drinking it every morning for a long time now, 6, 7, 8 months. I've lost track, and I'm a big fan. And I, again, encourage you guys to take advantage of the 48% off with the code JETS20 and check out the subscription part of it. So, we get through so many different individual podcasts and holistic film room looks and all these different things that we initially did for the class and that we're going to do going forward for this draft class of ultimately 7 players. I think this is an interesting time where we can have the breathing room to really dig in that much more. I think the team that put together the draft guide did a great job of being incredibly thorough and having a really good feel for a lot of players that just drafted. Guys that we were excited about, like Armand Membu and Mason Taylor, and guys that we weren't as excited about, like Arian Smith, but still put the time in to study him because the Jets showed interest in him in the pre-draft process, so it wasn't a crazy assumption they were going to take him. We just didn't expect that they would take him where he did. And, a pick that not just us were a little critical of, and you get a lot of the common feedback in that, like, give the guy a chance, and like, what do you know? It's a 4th-round pick. It doesn't really matter if he's even just a special teamer. And I get it. I do really get it. I'm a Jet fan first and foremost. I do think it's important to remember that we're just going to be honest with what we think of things, and we're going to be right about some things. We're going to be wrong about some things. And nothing would make anyone here happier than if a pick we're critical of turns out to be awesome. Now, my concerns with a guy like Smith and my concerns with the process in getting guys like Kiko and Barron where they did aren't just specifically about the player. It's just about who else could have been available and how you maneuver the board. And I think there'll be a lot of discussion about this. Ultimately, that stuff will fade away, and we're going to see how these guys hold up in camp and what their prospective roles are going to be. Like many people, maybe my oversimplified thoughts, and this still feels the same way a few days since the draft has ended, is that I really liked 4 of the Jets picks. I wasn't crazy about 3 of the picks. And, the undrafted class, I try not to get over my skis in evaluating. If you're lucky, 1 or 2 of these guys sticks and makes an impact. It's a 7-player class. I think Armand Membu in many ways was a chalk pick. It was one that, outside of Tyler Warren, we discussed the most. I think a lot of people expected. I think it solidifies a very good young offensive line and was strong value. Mason Taylor, very similar story. Got him at the right spot. Should be a day 1 starter. We're going to talk about a lot more how his game is going to fit in what is likely to be the Jets style of offense. We like Thomas, the corner, in the 3rd round, just particularly from a talent and a value perspective. There's so much to talk about with this Jets secondary and how they're going to use some of the different pieces here. When listing out their safeties and corners, it's just interesting how many guys theoretically could bounce between both spots, whether that's Stevens, whether that's JBC if he's still here, whether that's Stiggers, whether it's Isaiah Oliver. I think Thomas is a pure corner. Carter's, of course, a slot, but does this staff maybe move him around a little more? It's hard to say. The Jets are going to have a lot of interesting options and flexibility. Malachi Moore, they added to the mix with our favorite day 3 pick, my favorite day 3 pick, a guy who I think can push Tony Adams to start right away next to Cisco, especially if the Jets aren't going to add any other veterans. And then when I think you look at the other three, their path is going to be, can you make a special teams impact? With Smith, I think the Jets, and this came through in the post-pick interviews where they put a lot of time into this guy, and it sounds like they were very specific that they have a certain type of role in mind for him. Aaron Glenn talked about Jameson Williams. They're not comparable players by any means whatsoever, outside of them both being extremely fast. Is there a certain situational vertical role that they're going to package up for him where, he could just be the fastest guy in the field and add some value that way? Let's see. He needs to stay healthy. He needs to put some weight on. He needs to catch the football. They need someone, once you get past Reynolds and, for now, Lazard, to take some reps. And him and Corley could not be more different as players. Tyler Johnson, more experienced, obviously, than both of them, and has had a couple okay moments. All those guys are going to kind of be battling around for reps. I think it's more likely the Jets add a veteran defensive lineman than a veteran receiver. We talked about this a little bit on some of the pods earlier this week. I think in the building for the kind of offense the Jets are going to run, they likely think between Reynolds and Lazard, and particularly with Reynolds, they can get what they need out opposite of Garrett Wilson. Now, I'm not saying I agree with that. I'm not saying I wouldn't like another receiver, but Reynolds is not far removed from effectively being a starter on a Lions team for an offense that Angstrom was heavily involved in that basically almost got to the Super Bowl. So did they look at those two and say they could piece it together, and between Corley and Smith and Johnson, can we find enough other reps where we're getting what we need? I'm not necessarily sure. I'm expecting like the Amari Cooper signing or the trade for Pierce from the Colts, or do they call the Packers about Wicks or the Bucks about McMillan? I like some of these ideas. I just don't know how practical they are to expect, or maybe someone gets cut that we don't expect. Defensive line, I think we'll do a longer episode at some point. Like, who is really out there still? Our old friend Foley Fatukasi still out there. I don't know if he's coming home. Zadarius Smith is still out there as an edge. Will some other guys get cut post-draft? I think they'll add another body to the mix there, whether it's an edge or an interior defensive lineman, before they get into camp and see how those reps sort out. First draft class, 7 players. It felt like the right year to leave with 7 and not 11. Grades trickle in. I try not to go crazy on the grade process. I think most people I've seen range between a B plus to a B minus. I think if I'm giving a week 1 grade, which of course can be a little bit of a silly thing, it's probably right around a B plus. I was actually thrilled with how they used 4 of their first 5 picks, which is pretty good, right? I just really didn't like the 1 4th round pick, and maybe I'll be proven wrong on that. I didn't love how they closed round 5. Not sold on stacking up on that Miami defense. Could be wrong. They are a little light on linebackers, so maybe Kiko surprises more so of the two. My hope with Barron again is that, can he be the reason a guy like Clemens gets moved off this roster? I do have this sort of fear that I think is going to become a reality, that the Jets are going to go into camp with Lazard, with Clemens, and even with Greg Zuerlein all competing for roles again, which if you would have told me that in December, I would have been kind of mortified. Now with Zuerlein, they have Anders Carlson still. They have an undrafted kicker. Kickers get cut. Doesn't mean Zuerlein's going to be the kicker. Lazard situation, I think, is very contingent on Rodgers' situation, and if they do make another veteran move or not. If Rodgers stays retired and they don't make another veteran move, they're probably going to keep him to play 15 to 25 snaps a game. And, while he's not going to get a lot of targets because I think they'll throw to their running backs and now throw to Mason Taylor, he's certainly more proven than Corley or Tyler Johnson at this phase. So it's not that crazy, especially at the revised contract they have with him. Clemens, I'm not going to go down the rabbit hole again. You guys know how I feel. That he should not be playing any meaningful reps in this defense. And another guy we'll take a closer look at, and we've gotten some requests for this, is Leonard Taylor, who him and Braylon Allen have been the two guys I've kept circling that I think can and will take big jumps this year and need to. They really need Leonard Taylor to do that in the defensive line. Allen, I just think the Jets are going to run the ball so damn much, and Brees is going to be so involved in the passing game now that he's still here so far, knock on wood, that he's got to be the guy we saw against the Titans and to an extent against the Patriots in week 3 and be a serious contributor. And I liked what I saw from Isaiah Davis down the stretch. There's definitely some juice there. Donovan Edwards, long shot, but will compete for a roster spot, especially with his ability to catch the football. And, let's see what else happens from a veteran addition perspective. And, I've alluded to a lot of things we want to hypothetically do in May. June is a nice window where if there's certain things you want to see, different film rooms, different types of interviews or episodes, now that we're out of the Draft Guide live show, draft coverage, sort of high volume churn, we can mix in some different things. And we'll do our film rooms, do our rewatchables. But if you have different ideas, shoot them over on Patreon, shoot them over on the Discord. If you're watching on YouTube, join the Patreon. We only post like 35% of our content on YouTube. We do a lot more. We do stuff every single day, multiple times a day. So you only get that all at patreon.com/BadlandsTOJ. Also gives you an opportunity to join the Discord if you join our War Room tier, which is where we're at all the time, discussing all of our content, discussing the team, and where we get a lot of our ideas on different things we want to talk about and cover. So check that out. Also check out BadlandsTOJ.com. We got some merch. It's almost a summer somehow. We're in the month of Memorial Day weekend. So overall, I'm excited to take a closer look at not just Smith and try to find some more positives. It's going to take some more digging. But guys like Malachi Moore and Thomas, who are just perfect matches for what you would assume Aaron Glenn would want in the secondary. And how in the hell are the Jets going to kind of divide this up between Moore, Cisco, Stevens, Sauce, Carter, Thomas, Bernard Converse, Stiggers, Oliver? They signed Chris Boyd for special teams reasons. Tony Adams is still here. It's a lot of bodies. So are they going to be this very secondary heavy team? Is everyone going to be rotating around? I think in particular, that's an interesting thing to look at. Whereas with Membo and Taylor, I think we just want to watch even that much more of them because these are going to be week 1 starters. I see no way that they're not. And they're going to open up the path to the Jets being able to just run the damn hell out of the football. And I think a huge challenge and opportunity for Tanner Engstrom is, behind this offensive line, how do you maximize Fields, Brees, Allen, Davis, Garrett Wilson, and even your other receivers that we're skeptical of? Can you use Corley as a runner? Can you use Smith in the reverse game with his speed or smoke screens or whatever else you want to do with him? With Fields and Brees in the backfield, man, if you're blocking the way they should be up front, that's a hard thing for defenses to deal with. And listen, the Jets are going to have to throw at some point. You can't run the ball 170 times a game and win because you will fall behind and you do need to throw, which is why we're all concerned about receiver. But if you have a dominant run game, there'll be certain things they'll be open up play action wise and free Garrett up. They're going to have to move Garrett around like crazy. He's going to have to line up in the slot. He's going to have to be in motion. He's going to have to line up in the backfield and motion out wide because every smart team is going to be doubling him until other people show that they can beat them. And that's why they have to throw the ball to Breece Hall. That's why Mason Taylor needs to make an impact right away. That's why you got to get something out of a guy like Stone Smart, even as a situational tight end who's really more of a receiver. They need one of these guys of all these names that when we mention, you're like, oh, man, Josh Reynolds, Tyler Johnson, Stone Smart, Malachi Corley, Arian Smith. Like, of all the names I mentioned, could one and a half of them be productive, along with Brees and Garrett and Braylon and Davis and Taylor? If they do that and Fields is better in this system and is a little more well-rounded, could be a passable enough offense. We'll see. I do still think there is some work to be done. So, little midweek draft riffing. Plenty of more content to come before the weekends. Thank you, everybody, for listening. Enjoy your Wednesday, and we'll talk to you soon.